Good evening and welcome to our nightly news. I'm your host, Mariam Ziand, and here are your top stories. Gaza death toll soars with the death of 88 civilians in 10 new massacres by the Zionist occupation forces. Also coming up, UN Special Rapporteur on Palestine condemns the Zionist uprooting of people, while UNRWA chief revealed that Gaza child deaths in 4 months surpasses global war in 4 years. And Lebanese Foreign Ministry is to file a complaint before the UN Security Council after violent attacks on civilians. Welcome again to the program. Palestinian medical sources announced Wednesday that the death toll in the Gaza Strip has risen to 31,272 martyrs, the majority of whom are children and women. The same sources pointed out that the occupation forces committed 10 massacres against families in the Gaza Strip, resulting in the death of 88 citizens and the injury of 135 others during the past 24 hours. It added that 72% of the victims are children and women. The chief of the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees, UNRWA, Philippe Lazzarini, said that the tally of children who lost their lives in Gaza within slightly more than 4 months surpasses the total count of children killed in 4 years of wars around the world combined. UNRWA Commissioner General said the latest data of health authorities in Gaza indicate that at least 12,300 youngsters have died in the enclave in the last 4 months, compared with 12,193 globally between 2019 and 2022. The United Nations Special Rapporteur on Palestine, Francesca Albanese, has said that the Zionist enemy is uprooting people. Albanese quoted on X platform the Commissioner General of the UN Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees, Philippe Lazzarini, as saying that the number of children who have been killed in Gaza since October 7 is greater than the number of children killed in the world wars in 4 years.
In 5 months, Israel has killed more children in an area the size of the U.S. city of Philadelphia than all the world's wars in 4 years, uprooting a people.
The head of the government media office in Gaza, Salama Marouf, said that relief efforts destined for the Palestinian people remain weak and below the minimum in light of the departure of a ship loaded with aid from the Cypriot port of Larnaca heading to Gaza. Marouf also called for pressure to be applied on the occupation to bring in aid convoys by land and through known ports.
According to what was announced, the ship's load does not exceed the load of 1 or 2 trucks, and it will take days, and it is not yet known where it will dock and how it will reach the Gaza shore. In addition, it will be subject to inspection by the occupation army, and therefore this mechanism will be questioned. Everyone must put pressure on the occupation to bring in aid convoys by land and through known crossings such as Rafah and Karim Abu Salim, or activate Al-Mintar, Al-Shujaira and Beit Hanun crossings. The international community must mobilize urgently and before it is too late to save those who are dying of hunger. And the best way to do this is to operate land crossings in a way that allows the rapid entry of thousands of aid and relief trucks that are lined up on the Egyptian side of the Rafah crossing and to which the occupation denies entry.
In a statement to All 24 News Channel, the head of the media office in Gaza, Salama Maruf, said that more than 700,000 Palestinians in the northern Gaza Strip are suffering for the sixth consecutive month from the policy of siege and starvation practiced by the occupation, indicating that with every passing moment, the conditions are getting worse, especially in the northern Gaza Strip.
Speaking about the humanitarian situation in light of the policy of starvation, we should draw attention to what more than 700,000 Palestinians are suffering from in the northern Gaza Strip. They have been suffering for the sixth consecutive month of the policy of siege and starvation practiced by the occupation, which practically blocks the funneling of aid.
Also, the head of the media office in Gaza added that the current reality in Gaza imposes on the international community the necessity of a rapid mobilization and avoiding finding pretexts to justify the occupation's refusal to bring aid into the Strip. Here is Salama Maruf.
This reality imposes on the international community the necessity of a rapid mobilization, calling things by their names and avoiding finding pretexts and justifications to justify the occupation's refusal to bring aid.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said on Wednesday the Israeli government has a responsibility and an obligation to ensure the job of humanitarian agencies working in Gaza. Let's take a listen.
The Israeli military, the Israeli government have a responsibility and an obligation to do everything possible to ensure that the humanitarians can do their jobs. And among other things, that means making sure that if there's a humanitarian facility that's clearly identified, it's not struck. It means making sure that if there's a supply mission, a convoy, trucks going to a particular place at a particular time, that the Israeli military does everything possible to ensure its secure passage.
Media have reported that the construction of a pier on Gaza's coast is underway, following Washington's announcement to establish a seaport for aid delivery to residents of Gaza who have been under Zionist aggression for several months. Marwa Bilawar.
Images showing construction activities taking place on a dock along the Gaza Strip's coast were published by Reuters. The move follows the U.S. announcement that it will open a port to provide relief aid to the people of the Strip, which have been under siege by the Zionist entity for months.
Now, this is something that's going to take time to actually put in place, although we're working on it as expeditiously as possible. And I want to emphasize, it is a complement to, not a substitute for, other ways of getting humanitarian assistance into Gaza, and in particular, overland routes remain the most critical way to get assistance in and then to people who need it.
Although the anticipated location of the port has been kept under official wraps by Washington, the U.S. military has revealed that several of its ships are heading to Gaza to finish the project. This will allow the delivery of humanitarian aid to the Strip as per the U.S. Central Command.
In my personal opinion, this port, it will be built with what objective? We don't know what the objective is as Palestinian citizens. I think that the land crossings in Gaza are enough for aid to enter into Gaza Strip and for feeding the hungry in north and in the south. But the port, I'm not a political analyst, but I think it has political objectives, which are not known to us as Palestinian citizens. As a Palestinian citizen, I have a question. Who will receive the aid from the port and distribute to the public?
A pier is starting to make people wonder as much as they are curious about where it might be, how it will be run, and who will be in charge of collecting and distributing relief aid in the affected area.
I feel that the port has other objectives. The objective that I feel is that it will lead to the closure of the Rafah crossing, and it is the gate to exit the Gaza Strip, and the displacement of people. As they say, it is optional but based on food and drinks. They use hunger as a weapon in exchange of displacing people.
The United Nations reiterated that delivering aid by land was still preferable than transporting it by sea or dropping it by air to alleviate the sufferings of the people of the Gaza Strip, who are malnourished and dehydrated during the holy fasting month of Ramadan.
The Zionist occupation police announced that 2 soldiers were injured in a stabbing attack at the tunnel checkpoint of South al-Quds. The attacker reportedly rode a bicycle to the checkpoint before starting the stabbing operation, according to Hebrew media. The 2 injured were transferred to the hospital in al-Quds, where one of them received moderate wounds. In the meantime, the occupation forces bolstered their presence at the incident site. Hamas has praised the courageous stabbing operation at the tunnel checkpoint in Beit Lahem. The Islamic resistance movement also urged Palestinians in the Ayash Bank to remain vigilant, continue their resistance against the occupation, and deploy explosive devices to thwart its advances. Additionally, it called upon Palestinians across the West Bank to meet Al-Aqsa Mosque or to meet at Al-Aqsa Mosque, breaking the chains of the occupation and preventing attempts of unwanted conditions. Algerian Foreign Minister Ahmed Attaf received on Wednesday the European Union Special Representative in charge of the peace process in the Middle East, Sven Koopmans. A statement from the Algerian Foreign Ministry said both sides discussed developments in occupied Palestine in light of the continued occupation aggression on the Gaza Strip. The ministry added that the 2 parties also discussed ways to support efforts to impose a ceasefire and to enable humanitarian relief efforts, as well as prospects for publishing or for pushing the international community towards finding a permanent, just and final solution to the Palestinian issue. Algeria's Minister of Solidarity, Kautar Krikou, said that the Palestinian people are up against the Israeli occupation forces' machine of slaughter and destruction, particularly the Palestinian women who have continued to suffer since the Nakba. During an open discussion on bolstering conflict prevention in the UN Security Council, Krikou made a call to action for all those who support women's rights to speak up and demand an end to the brutal machine that kills Palestinian men and women.
We cannot address today's theme without tackling the suffering of the Palestinian people. They are facing the killing and destruction machine by the occupation force. This is especially so for the Palestinian woman who is still suffering since the occupation of its territory. Her suffering has aggravated by the recent aggravation on the unarmed Palestinian people, especially on the besieged Gaza Strip.
In other developments, the Lebanese news agency reported that 2 people were killed in a Zionist raid on El Haush district in southern Lebanon. The source added that the occupation launched its raid using a drone along El Haush Road, south of the city of Tyre. The targets of the attack were a tourist vehicle and a motorcycle, which led to their combustion. Meanwhile, local sources said that the Israeli occupation aircraft launched a second raid on the vicinity of the town of Alama al-Shab, while its artillery bombed the vicinity of other areas. And the Lebanese Foreign Ministry announced that Minister Abdullah Bouhabib instructed the relevant departments in the ministry to file a complaint before the UN Security Council following a series of Zionist attacks that it said were considered the most violent, targeting civilians and resulting in casualties and injuries. The Lebanese Foreign Ministry confirmed in a statement on Wednesday that the escalation in areas far from the southern Lebanese border indicates the Zionist entity's intent to expand the conflict and drag the entire region into a war, which is a maneuver by the Israeli government to alleviate internal pressures and challenges. In Morocco, both public and party-led initiatives have orchestrated protests outside parliament, urging an immediate halt to normalization efforts. This wave of demonstrations coincides with increasing calls for broader collective action against normalization with the Zionist entity. Husam Berkan has the report.
Moroccan citizens persist in their protests condemning the relentless campaign of extermination and starvation inflicted upon Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, coupled with demands for the Makhzen regime to abandon normalization efforts. Notably, cities like Rabat and Casablanca witnessed robust protests, with citizens from diverse age groups participating fervently. Palestinian flags and symbols flew high, while the Zionist flag burned in defiance.
In the wake of the holy month of Ramadan, the Moroccan Democratic Labour Party underscores the need for a robust mobilization in the streets of Morocco to demonstrate solidarity with Palestine. It calls for a unified effort to compel the Makhzen regime to hold the normalization process and sever all ties with the occupying entity. Moroccan youth are urged to engage in the battle of ideas, debunking Zionist narratives that distort history. The party family believes that the Makhzen regime aligns with the wrong side of history.
Renewing their demands, protesters across Morocco insist on the immediate cessation of normalization, the annulment of all agreements with the occupying entity, and the closure of Rabat leads in office, along with the expulsion of its occupants.
The Moroccan Democratic Labour Party emphasizes that Moroccans do not require engagement with the Zionist entity across various domains. Instead, normalization has yielded adverse consequences, jeopardizing the nation's economy and security. By aligning with perpetrators of genocide against a vulnerable populace, the regime risks compromising the core interests of the Moroccan people at the hands of those who prioritize their own gains.
Despite Ramadan, Zionist occupation forces continue their devastating assault on the Gaza Strip since October 7, resulting in tens of thousands of civilian casualties, predominantly children and women. This has led to unparalleled humanitarian catastrophe and extensive infrastructure damage, prompting Tel Aviv appearance before the International Court of Justice on charges of genocide.
By the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and the National Community Abroad, Ahmed Attaf, received Wednesday the special envoy of the President of the Republic of Azerbaijan, Elchin Amir Bayov. A statement by the Algerian Foreign Ministry said the two parties welcomed the momentum in relations between the two countries, underlining the need to take them to higher levels, particularly in the economic sphere. The statement also added that the two parties exchanged views and analyses on the issue of energy transition in view of the decisions of the 7th Summit of the Gas Exporting Countries Forum recently held in Algiers. The Algerian Minister of Knowledge Economy, Startups and Micro-Enterprises, Yassine Walid, will participate in the activities of the World Entrepreneurship Conference organized in Cape Town, South Africa. More than 1,500 participants from 43 African countries and more than 15 African ministers interested in entrepreneurship are participating in the conference. Minister Yassine Walid's participation in this conference aims to support the development of startups and small enterprises in Africa, as well as to create an enabling environment for African entrepreneurs to create job opportunities and to establish professional links between African companies, in addition to highlighting the pioneering role of Algeria in efforts to establish a stimulating African ecosystem for entrepreneurship. In Libya, Abdullah Al-Lafi and Musa Al-Kouni, representing the Presidential Council as the Supreme Commander of the Libyan Army, convened with Lieutenant General Mohammed Al-Haddad, Chief of General Staff, and Lieutenant General Salah ad-Din Al-Namrouj, Assistant Chief of Staff. The meeting addressed the country's military landscape and the operational status of all units. Furthermore, they examined the welfare of martyrs and injured personnel. Still in Libya, Abdullah Batili, the UN envoy to Libya, has called upon Libyan authorities and stakeholders to collectively advance the reconstruction of Derna and its surrounding regions. Batili emphasized the necessity of a coordinated national initiative for reconstruction alongside the urgent disbursement of funds to support long-term rebuilding endeavors. The statement comes on the heels of the 6-month anniversary of the catastrophic floods that swept through the eastern region, urging concerted action to restore stability and infrastructure. Save the Children, a non-governmental organization, issued a stark warning revealing that over 230,000 children and pregnant or recently postpartum women face the looming threat of starvation in war-torn Sudan. Amidst violent clashes between the army and rapid support forces spanning over 10 months, approximately 3 million children are grappling with malnutrition, with an additional 722,000 under the age of 5 are suffering from acute malnutrition. Save the Children has described Sudan's current state as one of the most dire food crises globally. Russian President Vladimir Putin said his country is ready to use nuclear weapons if there is a threat to its statehood, sovereignty, or independence. In an interview with Russian state television released early Wednesday, Putin said that in line with the country's security doctrine, Moscow is ready to use nuclear weapons in case of a threat to the existence of the Russian state.
Well, weapons exist to be used. We have our own principles. What do they mean? That we are ready to use weapons, including any weapons, including those you mentioned. If we are talking about the existence of the Russian state, about damaging our sovereignty and independence.
The Russian president also said that the main goal of Ukraine's recent attacks on Russian regions is to interfere with the upcoming presidential election. Here's Vladimir Putin.
The main goal, I have no doubt about it, is to, if not to disrupt the presidential elections in Russia, then at least somehow interfere with the normal process of expressing the will of citizens. Secondly, as I have already said, it's about the information component. And thirdly, if they have some success, to get some kind of chance, some kind of argument, some kind of trump card in a possible future negotiation process.
The battleground for the White House is set with a rematch between Biden and Trump looming large. As both candidates secure their party nominations, they face a tumultuous journey ahead, marked by age concerns, foreign policy dilemmas, and economic uncertainties. Nabil Khazini has the report.
The road to the White House and the race for the president's seat inside the US presidential palace will be between these two men. A Biden versus Trump rematch again after both candidates secured more than half of the Republican and Democratic delegates respectively needed for the nomination. But the path towards the White House will be full of challenges. Both Biden and Trump face several political hurdles, worries about their age, a frustration about the US alliance to the occupying entity of Palestine, and an economy facing several challenges. All make the 2024 US election binary a hard race and perhaps, as experts say, a no-choice rematch.
Barring some dramatic change with Joe Biden's health or Donald Trump's legal status, it appears as though it will be Trump versus Biden round 2 in an election rematch that no one wants. The problem is that neither of them have solutions, but when you look at the situation in Gaza, what's clear is that Biden is going to continue to support Netanyahu, continue to support the policy of ethnic cleansing against the Palestinian people. He made it clear. He said, well, we want more humanitarian aid, but he refused to cut off the funding to Netanyahu's army, the weapons, and the political cover, because the U.S. keeps vetoing UN Security Council resolutions. On the other side, Donald Trump is also totally committed to support Netanyahu. He said he was the best president when it comes to Israel that the United States ever had. So you have a situation where the Zionist lobby has control over both candidates.
Regardless of who is elected as the next US president, he will have to convince about his policy towards the war in Gaza for an angry crowd who over the past months have marched, called, demonstrated, spoken against the US backing of the occupation and its war in Gaza, which has killed more than 31,000 people.
So what's necessary is to have a shift from the American people. And we're beginning to see a growing sentiment because of the atrocities that people are seeing from social media, a growing sentiment to cut off support for Netanyahu. I don't know if this will have an effect in the short term. Biden promised a ceasefire by Ramadan. Of course, it's already Ramadan. There's no ceasefire. The real question then is, will enough American people cry out against genocide? And will the United States accept the ruling of the International Court of Justice if it finds, in fact, that the Israeli government is guilty of genocide?
The two candidates have opposing views on a host of issues, and while both men sailed through the binary season, their paths to win in November will be more difficult.
Ladies and gentlemen, our broadcast has come to an end. Thank you for joining us. Take care and have a good night.